Well, hi guys, welcome, and who dat? I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in to Rosenfield 10, where I cover our beloved Bless You Boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. If you're a Who Dat fan, subscribe to my channel. I love the Saints as much as you do, and that's what we talk about here. We talk about the Saints. Comment down low what you think. I respond to my comments, and today we're going to take the monthly look at positions of need for our Saints. We've done this in September, October, November, and now we've got the December issue. We're going to look at the greatest positions of need for the Saints in the last month of the regular season, and we're going to talk about it. I love doing this segment because there is no wrong answer. The Saints need help at every position. Maybe not quarterback. I heard some Saints content providers talk about maybe Spencer Rattler's a trade option now, and that we'd be better suited go and get a veteran backup quarterback for Tyler Shuck. And I'm sitting here thinking, how much money you're going to spend on a veteran backup when you've got three or four coaches that were quarterbacks, not to mention Spencer Rattler, who I think has a lot to offer as a backup quarterback. So, uh, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about going spend $4, $5, $6 million on a quarterback when that's the entire contract of probably both Shuck and Rattler put together. Anyway, every other position on this team, you could draft a player at and be justified, So I like doing it because there's no wrong answers. We're going to look, though, finally, because I've done this three times, and I've always separated the positions by offense and defense, never had, an actual power ranking of what is the most important. Though the last video, I truly believe the three most important positions were wide receiver, offensive guard, and tight end. Now, that's where I was at last month. This month, I still feel the same about guard and wide receiver, but the tight end position, I'm not so sure. If Juwan Johnson can hold on to the ball, maybe we have ourselves a good tight end. As far as a passing, receiving tight end goes, I still think we need a all around tight end. I still think we need help run blocking. We need to get the run game going. So okay, so yeah, so here's my final ranking of it. I'm going to go ahead and mix the offense and defense. And yeah, I think these are the eight most important positions. Now, the last one I have mentioned here is offensive tackle. I really should have that as offensive line because we could use depth at all three positions, tackle, guard, and center. Of course, we need better depth at tackle. If Luke Fortner turns out to be an okay option and he comes cheap and he's just a primary backup at center, then, maybe we're okay at center. I'm not sold. I think we can improve on Fortner. If we sign Will Clapp again, I'm not sure if Clapp is better at center than Fortner, maybe slightly, but we're talking about backup here. And in the draft, there's a ton of backup centers. So there's a ton of centers you can draft that could fulfill that backup role. Some of them might even be good starters. So, but this is how I have it here, and this is my final ranking. And it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are just the most important. And I think the top five are equally important. So offensive guard, edge rusher, wide receiver, running back, and defensive line. I think those are the five positions that really should be addressed ahead of everything else. And then you've got cornerback, tight end, and the offensive line. Tight end is still a really big issue for me. I really think tight end is something we need to focus on, and it could be in that top five. But God, man, there's you can never go wrong with getting more depth at cornerback. So I really believe cornerback is just a important position. It's super important. There was a time when Kool-Aid was our fourth cornerback on this team, and it felt pretty good because at any moment, somebody could come in and work out. So, we had Lattimore, and then he got hurt, and then we were, putting Taylor at the nickel sometimes. So Paulson Adebo and Kool-Aid McKinstry were your starters with Taylor at nickel, and then Adebo gets hurt, and then it forces us to play other people at nickel, and Taylor's on the outside with McKinstry, and you know, yeah, we had gotten down to, you know, down two cornerbacks and needing cornerback 3 and 4 to step up and be the man. So right now on our team at cornerback, we're talking about Kool-Aid McKinstry and Quincy Riley and Alante Taylor. And then your next guy up is Isaac Yadam. So, yeah, I think cornerback is pretty important. I've got it edged out over here, right above tight end. Let's start from the top, though, and we're going to talk about this as far as positions of need for the Saints that can be addressed either through the draft or through free agency. And I don't have the list of all of the free agents, so we're not going to be able to be completely thorough with this, but we're going to talk a lot about draft prospects and positions where you can address these positions in the draft. And let's start with offensive guard. It's the number one position for this team. We need two of them. So really, it should be the top two positions. And whether you think edge rusher is going to make a bigger difference in the end, or a big-bodied wide receiver, or Jeremiah Love at running back, and you think that's definitely going to make the bigger difference, I think you get a couple of better offensive guards on this team, and it'll improve the play of everybody, including Tyler Shuck and your running backs. I mean, we're just god awful up the middle. And how Tyler Shuck is able to win ball games behind this offensive line is beyond me. It's miraculous, actually. I mean, our receivers need to get open. They need to run crisp routes, and they need to get open quick because Shuck's going to have to throw the ball quick. He doesn't have any time. Neither did Rattler. So to me, offensive guard by far and away the most important position to fill on this team. I think once you get two starting offensive guards, you might actually win a couple of more games. We'd be in playoff contention right now. That's the way I am about this team. But do you address guard in the draft? Well, let's talk about what's available. So everyone says get a guard in free agency. All right, have you looked at the list of the free agent guards next year? I've written down a couple of them. You got the center from Cleveland and three guards out of Cleveland that are going to be free agents. One of them, Joe Batani, he would demand probably 12, $13 million a year. He's a 12-year veteran. So Batani's one of them guys that 12 years. Yeah, I don't know if you want to invest a ton of money, 13, $14 million into that guy. Another guy from Cleveland, Tevin Jenkins, he would demand a little bit more. He's looking at wanting to make 13.7 million. He's only a 5-year pro though. So I'm not sure about Jenkins with the Browns. I haven't watched him play. I'm just talking about list of free agents. Who's going to demand a lot of money? I'm assuming that's reflective on how good they are. And I'm going to tell you, how many years they've been in the league. So Jenkins, you want to spend 14 million a year, you can go get Jenkins from the Browns. He's a 5-year vet. The number one guy, it seems, in free agency is David Edwards, the guard out of Buffalo. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to demand $20 million a year. So kind of like last year with the guy from the Eagles. And he ended up, making 17, 20 million a year. David Edwards out of Buffalo is a 7-year vet, so he's perfect. Perfect. And that's probably the guy we need to go and get. Now, that's a lot of money to spend on a guard, but I'm assuming David Edwards is a sure thing. Another guy we could look at is out of Houston, Ed Ingram. He's a 4-year vet, and he's going to be a free agent, and he's going to demand that 12 to $13 million. deal. You've also got Dylan Parham out of the Raiders, who's only going to be asking for 10 or 11 million. He's been in the league 4 years. So yeah, everyone says go and get a guard in free agency and don't even think about drafting one. Just go and get the best one. Well, you're going to be spending 20 to 25 million to get David Edwards and to peel him away from Buffalo, a perennial playoff team, a good team. It's going to be tough. You might have to spend 25 million to get David Edwards to come and play for you. Or you might end up just spending 14 million and go and get a guy that was with the Browns. Even Ed Ingram out of Houston might want to just stay put. So, yeah, go get a guy from free agency. He's got to want to come and play here, and you're going to have to spend a lot of money. Otherwise, getting him here from a bad team would be a lot easier, but then you're getting another Dylan Reduns maybe, who's also a free agent. You could resign. So, grab one of them guys in free agency. Yeah, that's great. And then you still need another guard because Cesar Ruiz ain't it. I don't think Dylan Reduns is it. I don't think Torricelli Simpkins or Bill Sherman is it either. In the draft, you could go at guard with Olaiva Vega, Yone out of Penn State. You might have to spend a late first rounder to get him. Then you've got Emmanuel Pregnon out of Oregon. That's a second round guy. And then you're talking about Chase Bissonis out of Texas A&M. He's on the boards right now, factored to go at the third round, but there's very few guards in this draft. Bissonis will probably be a second round pick as well, in my opinion. Then you've got Keelan Rutledge, the guard out of Georgia Tech. Right now, on most boards, he's a day 3 pick, but because of the lack of guards in this draft, and that uninspiring free agent list, I'm thinking Keelan Rutledge is going to be a day 2 pick. Ross said this in his last mock, I think, and yeah, he's probably right. He was talking about the wide receiver Branch from Georgia, but he's drafted Rutledge a couple of times in the 5th round. I just don't think Rutledge is going to be there in the 5th round. Then you've got Kobe Baines out of Kansas. I really like him a lot. And yeah, Rutledge or Baines in the 4th round would be a pretty good way to go. And yeah, Charles Jagusa out of Notre Dame. That's a big dude. And he plays guard. And that's a guy that you can get maybe in day 3. But I like Kobe Baines out of Kansas a lot. And I wouldn't mind getting him in round 3. I say you can get him in round 4, but like I said, there's only a handful of guards in this draft that I really like. Chase Bissonis in the 3rd round would be a steal. There's a guy named Chris Adams out of Memphis who's getting round 2 buzz right now. I'm not sold on him too much. And everybody else in the interior offensive line in the draft are centers. And we'll talk about them at the end. Sam Boot. But yeah, there you go. I am a fan of drafting a guard and signing a guard in free agency. I know this team needs playmakers, but I also feel like unless there's a free agent out there, a young guy who's flying under the radar right now, and our team can identify him, yeah, yeah, I'm a sucker for picking up additional 3rd round picks by trading down once and then attacking guard with one of those or center because center's a big need for this team. All right, the next one on the list, edge rusher. I don't think we address this in free agency. I think we've got Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan opposite Chase Young. We've also got Chris Rumph in the mix. We've still got Jonah Williams who can do that from time to time, and Fadil Diggs on the practice squad, who's a 7th round draft pick. But everybody wants a stud. And I don't know if this team wants to go spend $40 million on a stud edge rusher opposite Chase Young. I think edge rusher is a position we're wanting to change body types at with what we've got. And we want a real stud opposite Chase Young. So I think with edge rusher, that's going to happen in the draft, and it's going to happen early. And most of the edge rushers in the draft class this year, the high priority first round guys, are kind of big for this defense. Ruben Bain is 275 pounds. Keldrick Falk is 285 pounds. TJ Parker's 265. Uagalele out of Oregon is like 270. LT Overton out of Alabama, that's another big one. I think he's about 270, maybe bigger than that. So those guys are all first round projections that just don't seem like the body type for the Saints. At edge rusher, I think we're going to want that more of a linebacker size type. And we're talking about David Bailey in the first round out of Texas Tech. He's 250. You got Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. He's 245. And then you've got R. Mason Thomas out of Oklahoma and Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee. Both of those guys are second round projections, and that's something that I think this is where the Saints should really focus. I mean, I think we're all wanting a wide receiver in the first round or that running back, Love. So if you go edge rusher, I think you can get a piece at wide receiver later on. I like the running backs in this draft too, but at edge rusher, yeah, you're either going Cassius Howell and David Bailey in the first round, or you're settling in the second round. And unless you're really in love with Bailey, who has off the field issues, or Cassius Howell, you're going to want to transform a big defensive end into an off the ball edge rusher, wide lined up edge rusher. So that's possible. The Saints could want to do that. I mean, Ruben Bain has a lot of talent. TJ Parker has a lot of talent, but I'm thinking edge rusher. Unless you go Bailey or Howell in the first round, you got to go R. Mason Thomas, Joshua Josephs in the second round. Romello Height wouldn't be so bad. I think Quincy Rhodes Jr. is going back to school. Zion Young and Damon Wilson Jr. out of Missouri are both interesting prospects. They're both kind of a mid-size, 260 something. Akeem Mesidor out of Miami. He's a bigger dude too. Danny or denied Dennis Sutton out of Penn State. Now we're talking about the third round. He's a bigger dude too. Kenyatta Jackson. He's got a lot of moves, but he's a bigger dude. Derek Moore out of Michigan is a guy that I really like at edge rusher, and you can maybe get him in the fourth round, third round, fourth round. So Derek Moore out of Michigan is a guy no one's really talking about. Mikhail Kamara out of Indiana. He's really small and could fit this role, but we're talking fourth or fifth round pick here. And I have skipped over a bunch of guys because a lot of them are just bigger guys that you might actually want to put a defensive end in a 3-4, like Mesidor or Dennis Sutton. Or Gabe Akis out of Illinois, or Tariq Sapp out of Florida, Anthony Lucas out of USC. I see all those guys possibly putting their hand in the dirt. So, edge rusher, there you go. You guys let me know if you have a favorite in the draft. Ruben Bain seems to be the guy. It just seems like at 275, he's kind of big for that wide nine, split out, outside linebacker, asked to cover sometimes. Edge rusher. And do you feel like edge rusher is the most important position of need for the Saints? The next one we're going to talk about is wide receiver. Everybody feels like it's important. And at this point in the season, when we've traded Rashid Shaheed, we've released Brandon Cooks, and we have Devon Vele injured. Yeah, wide receiver seems pretty desperate. Potential future guys in Trey Palmer and Jalen Polk who aren't going to play this year because they're injured, and Bub Means. Maybe wide receiver isn't a desperate need if Polk and Bub Means and Trey Palmer have something to give us next year. Not to mention the progression of Vele, who looks really good. Looks like a solid number two. He looks like a good number three. Really good, solid number one, number two. Could play and start and provide that size and everything else. But I think you can get better. And we all say Olave's a high level number two. So with Olave and Vele at best, I'm looking at two high level twos. Let's go and get a stud in the draft. That's kind of where I want to go with the first round pick or the second round pick or the third round pick. We have so many needs, but wide receiver, and we can take a big one. We can take a medium one. We can probably take a small one now. Now that we've gotten rid of Rashid and Cooks, a small playmaker wouldn't be out of the question for me. In the draft, Jordan Tyson is 6'1", 6'2", and the number one guy, Cornell Tate out of Ohio State, is the bigger guy that I like the best in the first round. And Makai Lemon, 5'11" out of USC, is a superstar playmaker. Denzel Boston out of Washington is a big guy, 6'4". Casey Concepcion out of Texas A&M is a smaller guy. Chris Bell is 6'2" and thick, and he can do it all out of Louisville. And Elijah Surratt out of Indiana. Everyone's hoping he falls to the second round. He's got great size. Chris Brazell out of Tennessee has great size. My Sambo's being a sour patch, and he's biting me. Jacoby Lane out of USC, a guy that's super tall, 6'4". He is a second round guy as well. Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama, I've always loved. Probably have to get him in the second round. He's a 6'1", 6-foot guy. Cooper Barquette out of Duke. Super high flyer rising in the draft out of Duke. Barquette is pretty good. They have him as a second round projection. I would not go that high with him. But in the first round, you're talking about Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. The Saints are probably picking seventh or 10th. I don't think Jordan Tyson's going to be there. Not sure if Cornell Tate's going to be there. Tate's probably the guy to get if he's still on the board with pick 7 or pick 10. That's my opinion. Mikhail Lemon is going to wow people at the combine for sure, and he's definitely a solid first round guy. There are sites that consider Lemon the best receiver out of this bunch. And then I love Denzel Boston, the size and the red zone threat he is, and scores a lot of touchdowns out of Washington. And I love Bell out of Louisville. He's grown a lot and as a receiver, and yeah, Bell wouldn't be a bad guy to get, especially in the second round. So there are a lot of wide receivers that you can focus on. Casey Concepcion is such a good playmaker, despite the lack of size. Antonio Williams, once thought to be first or second round projection out of Clemson. He's a smaller guy. He's looking to go in the third round now. Zachariah Branch out of Georgia is a stud. He's a good returner, great with the ball in his hands after the catch. He's floating around that third round projection right now. Omar Cooper out of Indiana is a good option. He's rising up the board. Skylar Bell out of UConn is another guy factored to go in the third round that a lot of people like. People love Nick Harbor out of South Carolina. The production's not there for me, but man, he's 6'5". He's 230 pounds, and he's super fast. Track speed fast. So, people fall in love with a guy like that. I wouldn't take Harbor till the fourth round. Ian Strong is a big guy out of Rutgers who looks to go in the third or fourth round. And there's a lot of other guys with size. If you want to go on day 3, you can get Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State, who's 6'4", I think. Deuce Robinson out of Florida State is a guy that I really like, and he's super tall. Josh Cameron out of Baylor, who He's not doing so great. He's projected to go in the sixth round, but he does have the size and he's got a lot of ability. Nick Anderson out of LSU is another guy in that sixth round range. Eric McAllister out of TCU reminds me of Nick Harbor, a guy that's super fast, super big, and you just hope they can put it all together. And there's a lot of guys way down the draft boards who, if they come out, they might be free agents, but they would be so worth looking at. Kevin Coleman Jr. out of Missouri, Dane Key out of Nebraska, Eugene Wilson III out of Florida, Evan Stewart out of Oregon, Marion Brown out of LSU. All of these guys might end up Chase Roberts out of BYU. All of these guys might end up sixth, seventh round picks or free agents, and they've all got super ability. Noah Thomas out of Georgia is really good. None of these guys I've just mentioned are supposed to get drafted. So I love the wide receiver position. I think you can improve. There's a chance you don't address it high in the draft at all, and you get one of these later guys in the later rounds, and you still improve the team because Kevin Austin Jr., Dante Pettis, all these guys are undrafted, and it's the bulk of our depth right now. We don't know what we have in Trey Palmer or Jalen Pope. Bub Means can't stay healthy, so yeah, wide receiver super important for me, and then running back. Kamara gets hurt. I still think Kamara's got another year left in him. And Kamara gets hurt, and Kendre Miller's currently hurt, and then Devin Neal has all this promise, but he was hurt in preseason and missed 2 games in preseason, and then now he's hurt again with a hamstring. So it feels desperate right now. This is the highest I've rated running back as far as a need for the Saints to have him in the top four here, but yeah, we know Kamara's going to be gone sooner than later. And Kendre Miller, regardless of how good he is when he's on the field, is never on the field. And you have to plan for that. So Devin Neal is a good guy to have as like your number three. If Kendre Miller's healthy and Alvin Kamara's healthy, Kamara number one, Miller number two, and then if you go and draft a guy, you're thinking he's going to compete with Neal or he'll be number four. And or you go and get the guy to replace Kamara now. You go and get the guy that's going to inevitably take Kendre Miller's place because you assume Miller's just going to get injured again. And yeah, and if you want to do that, you're going to have to address running back early. Of course, the only one we're going to talk about in the first round is Jeremiah Love. By the way, I don't think you go and get a free agent running back either. I mean, you could, like, like a couple of guys that would end up competing with Estime and Hull, cheap veterans like that. But to go and try and get a Brees Hall or something like that and pay them $25 million a year. Nah, I'd rather just take my chances with Kendre Miller's health and Neal's ability to improve, Kamara having one more good year in him, and get a young guy in here and see if we can get a guy, someone that'll take Miller's place and be our number two behind Kamara, and could eventually be our number one. Some people think Miller would be a good number one if he stayed healthy, and we've already got our replacement with Kamara. You go in the first round with Jeremiah Love, you will not be disappointed. I'm starting to think that is the number one guy. I'm starting to think that where we end up drafting, somewhere between, I'm thinking 8 and 12, Jeremiah Love is still on the board. He's probably your highest rated player. My coffee. I always have my coffee. I'm a Twin Peaks guy. Drank coffee well before I watched that. But anyway, uh, I'm going to talk about some other running backs in the draft because a lot of people never do. Um, After the first round, you might want to grab one in the second round if you want the cream of the crop that's left, but not sure if any of them, are justified in the second round. You're just taking them before anybody else can. The two guys that I'm thinking of primarily are Justice Haynes out of Michigan and Jonah Coleman out of Washington. Both of them are good pass protection running backs. Both of them are good catching the ball. Both of them are talented runners. Justice Haynes might be the best guy, the complete guy out of Michigan. I'm thinking Justice Haynes, with his ability to pass pro and his ability to run the ball, Haynes might be worth the second round pick. Jonah Coleman, late second round, into the third round. I like Coleman a lot. He's short, but he's thick. And then I'm thinking the two guys out of Penn State, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Nick Singleton has a third round grade. Katron Allen on this site that I'm at right now is pretty close to a late fourth round grade, but Allen's way better than that. Singleton's good in pass pro, and Katron Allen's just got the numbers. Just go look at his numbers. I mean, he and Singleton make a good combo. I kind of lean towards Singleton because of that pass pro, but I think Katron Allen would be the guy that would tote the rock for you a ton. Another guy that's very high on everyone's list is the backup running back behind Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, Jadarian Price. He's a pretty decent back. I wouldn't concern myself with anybody at this point until the fourth round. L.J. Martin out of BYU. I like him a lot. I just like him. He's not dynamic. He's just a big, bruising dude who can find the end zone. He's a well-rounded dude. Damon Claiborne out of Wake Forest has a lot of buzz. I'm thinking fourth rounder for him. We need to improve on that pass pro. Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska is a high riser right now. None of these guys would be worth anything until day three. But you take your chance. L.J. Martin out of BYU or Katron Allen out of Penn State. You can get either one of those guys in the fourth round. You might have your Kendre Miller replacement. Seriously, I like Jamarian Miller out of Alabama. I'm kind of a fan of his. And who doesn't love Hollywood Smothers out of North Carolina State? Dude might go undrafted. This is another thing. The Saints could use a speed element at running back. We don't have that right now. Le'Veon Moss out of Texas A&M is a good guy to think about. He's a complete guy. Jaden Ott's pretty fast out of Oklahoma. And a guy that I like is a Quintravion, pardon me, Wisner out of Texas. He's not a wow guy. Wisner to me is kind of like this year's Devin Neal, except Neal had all those school records. Wisner's good at pass pro, and Wisner can catch the ball, and Wisner's a good runner. He's a solid, complete guy. If he doesn't get drafted, I would make him a high priority free agent because I like what Wisner brings to the table as a potential pro. So yeah, those are the running backs that I like in the draft. And is there a guy that's going to come in here and just blow us out of the water? Jeremiah Love. You take him in the first round, you go ahead and worry about edge rusher or wide receiver in the second round or the third round. Your best bet might be Love in round one, and then edge rusher in round two, and then you still get a really solid wide receiver that can contribute in round three. And then you got two fourth round picks, right? This year, yeah, two fourth round, late fourth round picks. Maybe then you can grab a guard. Well, we're doing all of that and it's sounding really nice, but we've got other positions to look at here. Defensive line. I consider defensive tackle and defensive end as priorities for this team. The The nose tackle position held by Davin Gotchaw right now. So we'll have Gotchaw one more year, and I guess he's okay. And then Boyd behind him is okay. And so maybe you don't prioritize nose tackle just yet, but we're not all that great against the run constantly. I think that's our big issue. We definitely don't get pass rush with our defensive line, but getting the future at nose tackle wouldn't be a bad idea. There's only two players worthy of a first round pick in the draft at defensive tackle. That would be Peter Woods out of Clemson and Caden McDonald out of Ohio State. Woods can play all along the defensive line at 311, 15 pounds. But he could work at nose tackle, and Caden McDonald's certainly a nose tackle at 325. But there's a lot of guys in the second round you can consider. Daryl Jackson Jr. out of Florida State would be a good nose. Dominique Orange, Big Citrus out of Iowa State would be a good nose. Amari Washington out of Oregon could probably play multiple positions on the line, but he could make a decent nose. Caleb Banks out of Florida would make a good nose tackle, and he'd be stud against the run. You could keep him in there, You can have him play on the line multiple downs, not just at the nose. Banks out of Florida, Washington out of Oregon. You're going to have to get those guys in the second round. Big Citrus out of Iowa State. Probably a late second, third round grade on him. I'm not sold on Big Citrus, Dominique Orange. And then Daryl Jackson Jr., I like a lot out of Florida State. He may be a second rounder. A lot of places have him as a third rounder. Another defensive tackle to consider is Christian Miller out of Georgia. He would be more of that 3-4 defensive end kind of guy for us, but you want a solid player. He's a second round pick at defensive tackle, Miller out of Georgia. Now we're talking about third round, fourth round guys. Um, Dante Corleone. Everybody likes him out of Cincinnati. He's hot and cold. I mean, he's got some ability. He's definitely a nose tackle. And Corleone out of Cincinnati, I wouldn't take him to the fourth round. And then I would still be weary about it. Another nose tackle type would be Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. You might be able to get him in the fourth round with one of those late fourth round picks. That's something to think about. And these other guys would just be 3-4 defensive ends or just players just on the defensive line in general. Bear Alexander out of Oregon. You can get him in a fourth or fifth round. Anthony Smith out of Minnesota, fourth or fifth round. Zane Durant out of Penn State. Get him in the fourth round. He should be able to create a pass rush for you, at the end place. So I like Zane Durant as a pick. Um, I want to get a big guy to be that future nose. But if I'm going to get a guy that's going to create havoc on the defensive line and be a solid run stopper, Zane Durant is a guy I'm focusing on out of Penn State. DeMonte Capehart out of Clemson has always been an active guy. Xavier Harris out of Ole Miss. I wouldn't take either one of those guys till day 3 for sure. Another guy I'm really high on, Tim Keenan III out of Alabama. Good nose tackle type, and you could probably get him in the fifth round. Rashawn Benny out of Michigan is a guy that people think is going to go in the sixth round, but I really like him. And there's Cole Brevard out of Texas. Man, there's some sites that have him a day 3 prospect, but he may go on day 2. I'm interested in any defensive lineman, whether it's a nose tackle or a defensive end type. Defensive tackles in college who could play on the line and do anything, stop the run, rush the passer, whatever you got, because we don't have much of anything on our line. We have a bunch of solid veterans who are kind of low paid and they show up every now and then. Jonathan Bullard, Nathan Shepard, even Brian Brissett, who we're not going to get rid of anytime soon, but we could improve on as far as run stopping. Even Brissett doesn't bring that pressure down in and down out like we'd like to see. So defensive line is a huge priority for me. All right, cornerback. Well, we have a mixed match defense with Brandon Staley, and he inherited Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid seems to be working out pretty good in this system. Seems to be getting better. He's getting better against everybody he goes up against. I thought he was going to struggle with big wide receivers, and he's had his chance now against a few big ones, and he's been holding up all right. So I think McKinstry's getting better. And of course, Quincy Riley was handpicked by this team to be in this defense, and he's fitting just right. Another inherited player was Alontae Taylor, and although they rave about his ability to play the star position, I don't know if we're going to re-sign Alontae Taylor. He's a free agent after this year. If we re-sign him to a big contract and we just stick with it, when people think of Brandon Staley and they think of his past defenses, a lot of them think of Derwin James at safety, and they think of cornerbacks that really made an impact. And has Taylor really made that big of an impact? Maybe he's holding down the fort until Brandon Staley can go and get his guy. So when I think about cornerback, safety too, I think about not only improving on the outside above Kool-Aid McKinstry and a fourth round guy in Quincy Riley, but also getting a star, a potential star, or at least someone that can play nickel, you know, besides Alontae Taylor. So I don't know if you address it in free agency. There's probably DBs that'll be free agents that the Saints could get that Brandon Staley has worked with before, or Brandon Staley feels could fit in his defense. So, but yeah, I'm thinking possibly star guy that might be more of a safety role, but definitely on the outside. So I'm thinking on the outside, improving on the outside. And in the draft, Mansour Delane out of LSU is a first round guy that is going to improve the secondary tremendously. Jermod McCoy out of Tennessee, I don't know. He should go back to school, is what I'm thinking. He was hurt all year this year. He seems to have a lot of ability. I think if McCoy comes in here, he's fighting with Quincy Riley for a starting gig. Delane comes in here, he's starting alongside Kool-Aid McKinstry and Quincy Riley's your number three. Avion Terrell out of Clemson is a potential first round guy. I'm just okay with him. Colton Hood out of Tennessee, he's got a lot of ability, and he's a late first, early second cornerback. I think he and Kool-Aid are probably the same talent level. Brandon Sissy out of South Carolina might be the most talented cornerback after Delane. Uh, he's a high riser on the boards right now. He would not be a bad guy to get in the second round. A small school guy that everyone likes is Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. He's projected to go in the second round. Keith Abney the second out of Arizona State. There's a lot of buzz on him early in the process. He seems a little flat-footed to me. I'm not sure if he would fit into this system or not, but if Brandon Staley thinks so, Abney is a second round projection. D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana is a really small guy, but he is spunky and feisty. He's a third round projection. Julian Neal out of Arkansas, really good player, good size. He's a third round guy. A.J. Harris out of Penn State. Now, he's had a down year. People wanted him to be this great thing, and he's not a first round guy. He's probably not a second round guy. A.J. Harris out of Penn State is a third round guy. But Harris is a smart player who can play man and zone and can do some mix match because he's so smart. I think he has in him to learn it, and he has the physical ability. I think Harris is a pretty good third round pick for this team. I got Harris circled. Not a lot of people are talking about how good he is. They're talking about what they thought he would be and what he hasn't got, which is, first round grade. They can't all be first round grades, but you get a smart guy who can play zone and man and put him in this defense. I think Harris would fit in this defense, so I've got him circled. Willie the third out of Texas A&M, Malik Muhammad out of Texas, Chandler Rivers out of Duke. All of these guys are third round projections. Davison Igbinosun out of Ohio State. He's an up and down guy for me. There's a place for him in this league. I think he would be fine. Damani Jackson, another up and down guy out of Alabama. I think he would fit in our system though. So I'm not going to turn my head on Jackson. Dalen Everett out of Georgia. I always picture him as a nickel type. Decario Davis out of Washington is a really tall, big cornerback. Not sure how he fits. We're getting into the fourth round now. A guy that I think would fit really well is DJ McKinney out of Colorado. He can do some mixed match with a lot of zone and man ability. McKinney is another one I've got circled as a potential to fit into our defense very well. So I'm going all the way into the third round with these cornerbacks. I really do think you can improve. I mean, I'm not saying draft Delane in the first round, especially with all the other needs here ahead of cornerback. But uh, when Brandon Staley is wanting to fill his defense with his players, he inherited Kool-Aid. He inherited Taylor. So that's our number one and number two cornerbacks right there. And Staley may see one of these guys and say, hey, I got to go get Masses out of California because he's going to fit into this defense well. And if he thinks so, let him go and get him. I mean, Julian Blackman was just sitting in the free agent market. Nobody wanted him. Staley wanted him, and God, man, for a few for a few weeks in preseason and then the first game of the year, we had a stud, right? Then he gets hurt. But yeah, so cornerback, Brandon Staley's preference could be high priority. Tight end, I'm sorry, I think it's an important thing because we're not very good at run blocking. And Juwan Johnson is a receiver, and I want Juwan Johnson to be our third down tight end. I don't want him inline run blocking. I want him split out run blocking. I want him out there on third down. I need a complete tight end to be 100% happy with this offense. Tight ends very important. Let's talk about some free agent tight ends. Dallas Goddard is going to be a free agent. He's an 8-year veteran. Tyler Higbee is going to be a free agent. He's a 10-year veteran. Noah Fant, who we couldn't sign this past year, is going to be a free agent. He's a 7-year veteran. Cade Otton, we all know him. I think he's a 4-year guy. He's going to be a free agent. Isaiah Likely, stud receiving tight end from Baltimore, 4-year veteran. He's going to be a free agent. So you can go and get one of those tight ends and have yourself a nice veteran with Juwan Johnson. And it wouldn't surprise me if we do go and get something like that because the state of our tight end room is as follows. You've got Juwan Johnson under contract for 2 more years, who's not a run blocker. And then what do you have? Free agents is what you have. Jack Stoll is a free agent. Foster Moreau is a free agent. Taysom Hill is a free agent. And even Zaire Mitchell Payton, he's a exclusive rights free agent. So yeah, we essentially only have one tight end on the roster next year, unless we re-sign some guys that are going out. So it would not surprise me to go ahead and get a free agent, even a guy that's going to cost us money, you know, get a guy that can come in and play opposite Juwan Johnson. I would really like a run blocking tight end. That would make me so happy. A guy that can be out there early downs, a threat to catch the ball, but can obviously run block. Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon is the number one tight end, and he's worth a first round pick. Not sure if he's worth the 10th overall pick or the 12th overall pick, but I've always fancied the notion of trading down, even if we could just once, and picking up extra picks. This team could use so much help. I wouldn't mind trading down, end up stuck picking 15th or 16th overall, and then getting tight end Kenyon Sadiq. I wouldn't mind that at all. Max Clare out of Ohio State is a complete all around guy that can run, block, and receive. He doesn't have the receiving stats this year because he's at Ohio State where they have great wide receivers catching everything. But Max Clare is an all around guy. And even though he's a third round projection, he's going to get drafted in the second round. I don't know if the Saints want to take him with that early second round pick, but if Claire does fall to the third round, that's a no brainer. Michael Trigg is a stud receiver, but he's just Juwan Johnson 2.0. He's not going to give you much at run blocking. And what I want is a run blocker. Now, if you go into the draft, you don't get a big wide receiver, and Triggs there in the third round, yeah, you can grab him and have another piece. I just feel like it's a clone of Juwan Johnson. Probably better than Juwan, but still a clone of Juwan. A complete all around tight end, Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt, who, in my opinion, for the last couple of years, I really just looked at as a receiving tight end, but Stowers has gotten a lot better at run blocking. Eli Stowers is a guy that I would feel like could give you more run blocking than Juwan Johnson does. So Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt, huge fan of. Oscar Delp out of Georgia, great run blocker. And he doesn't have the overpowering size to be blocking defensive ends and stuff like that, but he is really good in form and technique. So Oscar Delp is a guy I would look at, especially if he's there in the fourth round. If Delp is there in the fourth round, grab him. Jack Injuries out of Texas is another all-around guy that I would grab, and I would grab him in the fourth round. Eli Raridon out of Notre Dame, complete all-around guy, really good run blocker. Raridon is a guy that I think you would have to target in the fourth round. This site has him as a fifth round pick, but no, Raridon's a good run blocker. You know, we've had a bunch of guys like the Mitchell Evans that the Carolina Panthers got last year in the fourth round, and then Buffalo got Jackson Hawes in the fifth round last year. Mitchell Evans, Jackson Hawes. Those were the two guys that they can give you something in the passing game, but you know they can run block. That's where I'm at here with Raridon at Notre Dame. I think he's a guy you go and get and take that chance. Same thing with Oscar Delp. Just too much run blocking ability there. Joe Royer out of Cincinnati, Tanner Arkin out of Illinois, Benji Gosnell out of Virginia Tech, Sam Roosh out of Stanford. Now, I don't know much about those guys. But Lawson Lucky out of Georgia is a solid all around guy. He would be interesting to get in the fifth or sixth round. These are all day three guys now. Justin Jolly out of North Carolina State is a guy I have a lot of hope for to develop in this league, to be able to fit in the league. Justin Jolly out of North Carolina State. I also really like Terrence Carter. Terrence Carter out of Texas Tech. And another guy I'm going to mention before I get off tight end here is Tanner Kozoil, Koziol out of Houston. That dude is 6'7", just a big, lanky guy. Don't know if he gives you much as a run blocker, but yeah, if Tanner out of Houston is still there in the seventh round, I would take a chance on him and feel a lot better than the chance we took at the seventh round tight end we got this past year, who really didn't seem like he was great at anything. But he's on our practice squad and he gets to develop. The last thing I'll talk about is offensive tackle. We need a backup offensive tackle. Sure, we traded for Awesome Richards. He's not very awesome. And now we've got this Bill Sherman guy who can play guard and tackle, and he's been stepping up and having to start. Not doing very well, but he's there. I think you need a stud backup offensive tackle. I'm not saying draft a tackle in the first round and move a tackle to guard. I'm not saying that, but I am saying you get into the second round and a guy like Caden Proctor out of Alabama is still hanging around, or Caleb Lemieux out of Utah, or Jennings Dunker out of Iowa, Trevor Gooseby out of Texas, Isaiah World out of Oregon. If those guys are still there in the second round, you might draft them. Does he start? No. Does he learn guard? I hope. But I'm tired of watching our tackles get hurt and then, a backup going in there and just looking awful. I would really like some depth at offensive tackle that's worth it. You want to go later round, you don't want to spend a second round pick. Blake Miller out of Clemson, Caleb Tiernan out of Northwestern. Those guys are in that second round to third round range. Tiernan's probably going to go in the second round when it's all said and done. I really like Austin Seraveld out of Ohio State. He's a second to third round guy. Carter Smith out of Indiana is rising up the boards right now at tackle. Brian Parker the third is a tackle. The second is a tackle out of Duke. Austin Barber, tackle out of Florida. Caden Green, tackle out of Missouri. Those guys are all going to be fourth round, third round, fourth round picks. You don't want to get a tackle that early. I'm saying some of these guys, like Caden Green out of Missouri, you might want to just try to play him at guard. Saraveld out of Ohio State. If you get one of these tackles, I'm thinking you try him at guard to start with and see what happens. But there's some talent at the tackle position in this draft way down the line. Trey Zunn out of Texas A&M, Ernest Green out of Georgia, Lance Hurd out of Tennessee, J.C. Davis out of Illinois, Fa'alili Fa'amo out of Wake Forest. All of these guys are supposed to go on day 3. Jacarius Peak out of North Carolina State. That's a guy, if you can get him in day 3, Jacarius Peak. That's a tackle I want. Alex Harkey out of Oregon. I'm a big fan of his. Get either of those guys in day 3. Maybe Tristan Lee out of Clemson. You get those guys on day 3, you have yourself some competition for Awesome Richards, who's not so awesome, in my opinion, right now. And then, like I said, I'm talking about offensive tackle here, but interior offensive lineman, the center position. We could really use a center, and there's so many good ones. Connor Lew out of Auburn, you'll probably have to get him in the second round. Jake Slaughter out of Florida, third round. Iapani Lalulu out of Oregon, the Strafe. Oh, I love it. He's a third or fourth round guy. Parker Brailsford out of Alabama, fourth round. Logan Jones out of Iowa. He's not strong, but he's fast and he's technically sound. That's a fourth rounder out of Iowa. Sheridan Wilson out of Texas Tech. You can get him in the fifth round. And yeah, I think Bryce Foster out of Kansas is a guy that you can get later on as well. It's just a lot of centers. There's not a lot of guards for the Saints to choose in the draft, but there's a ton of centers and centers that I like. All right, that's a really long video, and I sat here and rambled off a bunch of players. I'm sorry I didn't have graphics for all of them and stuff, but Those are the eight positions of need for the Saints, I think, right now in the last month of the regular season. You need two offensive guards. You need a solid, big number one edge rusher out opposite Chase Young. And it's important as well because Jordan will probably retire soon. We don't have the body parts, the types that we need for that position on the team. So edge rusher overall, very important. Wide receiver, you just don't know what you have in the cupboard right now, and we're stripped to the bone. Running back, yeah, maybe Jeremiah Love's the guy to get in the first round. But if not, there's a bunch that I've mentioned that you can look at in later rounds. Defensive line, all across the board. We need to improve there. And I edge that out ahead of tight end and cornerback, even though I feel like tight end's super important. Cornerback is just always important. You could probably draft a cornerback with a high round pick every year and still need cornerbacks. And then backup offensive linemen, whether that be another guard, another center, another tackle. We need a backup center. We really need a backup tackle. And yeah, we could use some guards too. If we re-sign Dylan Reduns and he ends up being our true number three guard behind our two new starters, that would be okay, I guess. But other than that, guard's the way to go. So you guys let me know how you feel. I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry this took so long. Here's a hint. Put your playback speed at 1.25 when you watch my videos so you can get through them faster. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 because I'll be doing this all year long. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?